My husband texted me, "Happy 10th anniversary, babe. I am stuck at work doing a pitch deck." But I was sitting 2 tables away in the same upscale Manhattan restaurant, watching him lean across the candlelit table and kiss his millionaire mistress. Just as I stood up to confront them, a strange woman grabbed my arm and whispered, "Stay calm. The real show is about to start." And what happened next made the entire restaurant go silent. My name is Natalie, and at 33 years old, I never expected to celebrate a decade of marriage by watching my husband get publicly destroyed. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart a toxic partner. Trust me, you will want to hear how I handled the ultimate betrayal. My husband Weston was supposed to be the brilliant CEO of a tech startup. Instead, he was busy tracing the jawline of a woman I would later learn was Bianca, a venture capital portfolio director. I gripped the edge of my table, my heart pounding against my ribs, ready to march over and flip their bottle of champagne right into his lap. But the tight grip on my wrist stopped me. I turned to see an elegant woman in a sharp designer suit sitting next to mine. She did not look at me. Her eyes were fixed on Weston. "Stay seated," she commanded, her voice icy. 5 seconds later, the heavy oak door swung open. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stormed past the hostess, ignoring her protests. He marched straight to Weston and Bianca. He did not yell. He simply picked up Bianca's full glass of red wine and threw it directly into Weston's face. Weston sputtered, jumping back as the crimson liquid stained his crisp white shirt. "What the hell is your problem?" Weston shouted, trying to wipe his eyes. The man grabbed Weston by the collar. "The problem is you are sleeping with my fiancé." And with one swift motion, the man drove his fist straight into Weston's jaw. The sharp sound echoed over the soft jazz playing in the dining room. Diners gasped. Waiters froze. Weston crashed into the neighboring table, sending silverware and crystal glasses shattering onto the floor. Bianca screamed, begging him to stop. Weston scrambled to his feet, blood dripping from his lip. He did not defend his mistress. He shoved past a terrified waiter and sprinted out the back exit, leaving Bianca crying and humiliated in front of the crowd. I sat frozen, taking in the chaotic scene. The woman beside me finally let go of my wrist. She picked up a white cloth napkin and slid it over to me. "You might want to wipe that shocked look off your face," she said dryly. "You are the wife, right?" I blinked at her, completely caught off guard. "How did you know?" She took a slow sip of her martini. "I make it my business to know everything. It is a real shame." "You are a highly paid forensic accountant, a professional who gets paid to investigate corporate fraud for a living. Yet you did not even notice your own husband draining your joint savings account to buy that woman a $15,000 Cartier watch." The words hit me harder than the punch had hit Weston. She knew my exact profession. She knew about my private bank accounts. Before I could demand answers about who she was, she stood up gracefully, dropped a $100 bill on her table, and walked away without looking back. I pulled out my phone and immediately opened my banking application. My hands shook as the screen loaded. The joint savings account that I had spent the last 5 years building was almost completely empty. Only $200 remained out of the $90,000 we had carefully saved. A sickening wave of nausea washed over me. Not only was he cheating on me with a wealthy investor, but he was stealing my hard-earned money to fund his pathetic double life. My phone suddenly vibrated in my palm, pulling me out of my sudden heavy shock. It was a new text message from Weston. "Just got mugged at gunpoint outside the office building. I am heading home right now. I am so sorry, babe." I stared at the glowing phone screen. He was playing the victim. He actually thought I was waiting at home, completely clueless. I took a long, deep breath, wiped my tired face, and carefully typed my calm reply. "Oh my God, are you okay? I will be waiting for you to get home." The ultimate sweet revenge had only just finally begun. I arrived at our house 20 minutes before Weston. I needed that time to wash my face, drink a glass of ice water, and practice my performance in the hallway mirror. When the front door finally clicked open, I rushed into the entryway, wearing my most convincing mask of wifely concern. Weston stumbled inside, clutching his stomach. His crisp white shirt, the same one I had just seen stained with red wine, was now strategically ripped at the collar and rubbed with dirt. A dark purple bruise was already blooming along his jawline, courtesy of his mistress's angry fiancé. "Oh my God! Weston!" I gasped, running to him and grabbing his arms. "What happened to you?" He leaned heavily against the wall, letting out a dramatic, painful groan. "Two guys jumped me in the parking garage outside my office." He lied, his voice trembling with fake trauma. "They had a weapon. They took my watch and my wallet. I fought them off the best I could, but one of them got a lucky punch in." I gently touched his bruised cheek, feeling my stomach turn violently. He was looking right into my eyes, lying with terrifying ease. He had rehearsed this entire story on the drive home. "I am just so glad you are alive," I whispered, burying my face in his chest so he would not see my absolute disgust. As I hugged him, he smelled faintly of expensive perfume and stale alcohol. I pulled away and led him carefully to the living room couch, playing the role of the devoted caretaker. He sank into the plush cushions, wincing as if he had broken ribs. "I am so sorry about our anniversary dinner," he murmured, reaching into his jacket pocket. "The muggers took everything, but by some miracle they missed this. It must have fallen deep into the lining of my coat when they attacked me." He pulled out a small velvet box and popped it open. Inside rested a thin, flimsy silver chain with a cloudy cubic zirconia pendant. It was the kind of cheap $50 trinket you could buy at a mall kiosk on your lunch break. This was my 10th anniversary gift, a last-minute panic purchase from a drugstore. Meanwhile, his mistress was wearing a $15,000 Cartier watch paid for with the life savings I had carefully managed for us. "It is beautiful," I lied, forcing genuine-sounding tears of gratitude into my eyes. I let him fasten the cheap metal around my neck. Weston smiled weakly, leaning his head back against the sofa. "I push myself to the absolute limit every single day for moments like this." He sighed heavily, playing the exhausted hero. "You know I take on all this stress to provide a good life for us." Building a tech startup is a total blood sport, Natalie. You get to clock out of your accounting firm at 5 and just count other people's money all day. Your job is safe, it is predictable. But I am out in the trenches building an empire for our future. You have no idea the kind of pressure I am under." He actually believed his own delusion. He truly thought my career as a forensic accountant was just basic bookkeeping. He had no idea my daily job involved hunting down hidden assets, analyzing fraudulent tax returns, and destroying corrupt corporate executives. He had no idea he was currently sitting on a couch with his worst nightmare. "I need to sleep," he groaned, rubbing his swollen jaw. "The police said I should just rest tonight and file a formal report with the precinct tomorrow morning." "Of course," I replied, standing up and smoothing his hair. "I will bring you some ice and pain medicine." I waited in the dark kitchen, listening to his heavy footsteps slowly climbing the stairs. I counted the minutes. Half an hour later, the soft, rhythmic sound of his snoring drifted down from the master bedroom. He had taken 2 sleeping pills to escape the pain of his bruised face. I slipped off my shoes and crept upstairs, stepping carefully over the familiar creaky floorboard near the doorway. His silver laptop was sitting on his home office desk. Weston was so arrogant and careless, he had never changed his password since the day we got married. He still used the name of his childhood dog. I typed it in, and the screen unlocked instantly. I bypassed his personal email and went straight for his secure business files. If he was funneling our joint savings into his startup, I needed to know exactly where the money was bleeding. I opened his primary banking portal. Seeing the almost empty joint savings account again made my blood boil, but I forced myself to dig deeper. I accessed his company ledgers and began tracing the recent transactions. Right there, blinking rapidly on the screen, was a pending outgoing wire transfer. $200,000 scheduled to clear the bank at 9 in the morning. The destination was not a vendor or a tech supplier. It was an offshore shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Weston was not just cheating on me, he was actively hiding hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was going to find every single penny. The next morning I sat at the kitchen island staring at my cold coffee. I had not slept a single minute. My mind was racing, analyzing the offshore account routing numbers I had meticulously copied from Weston's laptop the night before. I was already mentally mapping out the complex financial web he was trying to weave. Just as I was calculating how quickly I could legally secure our remaining assets, the front door suddenly flew open, hitting the wall with a loud thud. Heavy, hurried footsteps echoed sharply in the foyer. Before I could even stand up, my mother-in-law Brenda marched directly into the kitchen. She absolutely did not knock. She almost never did. She still used the spare key we gave her for emergencies as a permanent free pass to invade my home whenever she pleased. Her face was pulled into a tight, severe scowl, and her eyes immediately zeroed in on me, sitting quietly at the counter. "Good! You are awake!" she snapped loudly, dropping her heavy leather designer handbag onto the pristine marble counter. "I need you to sign these documents right now." No questions asked. She slapped the manila folder down right next to my coffee mug. With a sharp flick of her wrist, she flipped it open, revealing a thick stack of complicated legal documents flagged with neon yellow sticky notes. I recognized the dense banking formatting immediately. It was a formal application for a home equity line of credit, a massive loan against the value of the property. "What exactly is this, Brenda?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly calm and completely steady despite the anger boiling inside me. "It is the paperwork for the bank," she said aggressively, waving a heavy silver pen right in my face. "Weston called me this morning in absolute distress. He told me about the awful, terrifying mugging he barely survived last night. He needs capital immediately to close a massive tech deal by Friday. The bank requires both of your legal signatures to borrow against the equity of this house. Sign it now." I stared down at the paperwork. Weston was panicking because I had secretly logged into our accounts at dawn. I had already transferred the remaining funds from our joint account into my private secure account. He thought his Cayman Islands wire transfer was going to bounce, so he was desperately trying to leverage our home to get the money for his millionaire mistress. He was willing to put a lien on my roof to fund his lies. "I am not signing a loan against our home." "Brenda," I said firmly, pushing the heavy folder back toward her, "Weston and I have already discussed our strict financial boundaries." Her face flushed a deep, bright red. She slammed both of her hands down on the countertop, leaning her face in uncomfortably close to mine. "You listen to me, you ungrateful, arrogant girl," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "My son works himself to the absolute bone every single day to provide for you. He is out there building a massive legacy while you sit here playing with spreadsheets. Weston paid for your master's degree. The absolute least you can do is support his dream when he actually needs you." I slowly stood up, pushing my chair back and matching her height. My voice dropped, turning ice cold. "Let us get the facts straight right now, Brenda. Weston did not pay a single dime for my education. My academic scholarship paid for my master's degree. And while I was studying late at night, I worked 2 jobs during the day to pay the rent for the apartment he lived in for free, while his first 3 businesses completely failed. Do not ever rewrite my history to make your son look like a savior." Brenda gasped, taking a dramatic step back, as if I had physically slapped her. Her eyes widened with absolute shock and sudden fury. For 10 years I had played the quiet, respectful daughter-in-law. I had swallowed her passive-aggressive insults simply to keep the peace. But today that peace was completely dead and buried. "You are a selfish, spiteful, terrible woman," she spat angrily, grabbing the folder and clutching it tight against her chest. "No wonder he is always so stressed. If you refuse to support your husband in his time of need, then you are of no use to him. I will tell Weston to file for divorce immediately. We have the best lawyers in the entire city. He will divorce you, and he will take everything. You will be left with absolutely nothing. She stood there breathing heavily, waiting for me to break down. She expected me to cry. She expected me to panic, reach for the silver pen, and beg for her forgiveness. Instead, I looked right at her angry red face and felt a genuine bright smile spread across my lips. I thought about the secret Cayman Islands wire transfer. I thought about the fake $50 necklace sitting on my dresser. I thought about the glittering $15,000 Cartier watch securely fastened on Bianca's wrist. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew exactly how this war would end. I crossed my arms confidently and looked Brenda dead in the eyes. I stared right back at her and said, "Let him." That evening, I was forced to attend the mandatory weekly family dinner at Brenda's house. I sat across the long mahogany dining table, gripping my heavy silver fork. Weston sat at the head of the table, acting as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his bruised shoulders. He had spent the afternoon complaining about my refusal to sign the loan documents. He let out a long sigh and pushed his roasted chicken around his expensive porcelain plate. "I just do not understand how someone can be so incredibly short-sighted," he announced loudly, ensuring the table fell completely silent. "I am on the verge of revolutionizing the tech industry, and my own wife refuses to support the vision." Brenda nodded sympathetically, patting his hand. "It is tragic, Weston," she murmured, glaring directly at me from across the table. "Some people lack the intellectual capacity to understand true entrepreneurial genius." Weston leaned back in his chair, playing the wounded martyr. "I just need a partner who believes in me," he continued, his voice thick with fake disappointment. "Instead, I get a forensic accountant who treats my billion-dollar startup like a risky liability. She wants to play it safe while I am trying to change the world. It is exhausting fighting battles in the boardroom and coming home to fight my own wife. I provide a beautiful lifestyle, and she repays me by refusing to help secure the bridge loan my company desperately needs." The sharp clatter of a heavy fork dropping onto a ceramic plate shattered the tense atmosphere. Everyone turned to look. Jasmine, my sister-in-law, sat next to Weston's brother Donovan. Jasmine was a brilliant corporate human resources director and one of the only people in this family who saw right through the thick layers of absolute nonsense. She wiped her mouth with a linen napkin, her dark eyes locking directly onto Weston. "Entrepreneurial genius," Jasmine repeated, her voice dripping with heavy sarcasm. "Oh, we are definitely calling it that now. That is fascinating, Weston. Because from my professional perspective, it looks like a completely different kind of genius." Weston stiffened. "What is that supposed to mean, Jasmine?" he snapped defensively. Jasmine smiled a sharp, dangerous smile. "I am just admiring your unique leadership style," she said casually, leaning forward, resting her elbows on the table. "It takes a very special kind of visionary to lay off 15 junior software developers on a Tuesday, claiming a severe budget crisis, and then mysteriously show up to the family dinner driving a brand new $100,000 Porsche. You must be writing a masterclass on how to mismanage funds while demanding endless loyalty from your staff." The dining room went dead silent. Brenda choked on her red wine. Donovan stared at his plate, too afraid to speak. Weston turned completely pale, his jaw clenching so hard the purple bruise on his face seemed to throb. "I leased that car for client meetings," he stammered nervously. "It is a necessary business expense for projecting success to our investors." Jasmine let out a short, bitter laugh. "Right," she replied, picking up her wine glass. "Nothing projects success quite like firing single mothers right before the holidays while you test drive German engineering. You are a real inspiration to us, Weston." The rest of the dinner was agonizingly quiet. Weston refused to make eye contact with anyone staring fiercely at his phone screen. I quietly excused myself before dessert, claiming a severe headache. I grabbed my heavy coat from the front closet, eager to escape the suffocating air of that toxic house. As I pulled my jacket over my shoulders, I heard the click of high heels on the hardwood floor behind me. I turned to see Jasmine stepping into the dimly lit hallway. She glanced quickly over her shoulder toward the dining room, ensuring no one was watching us. Without saying a word, she stepped close to me and slid her hand into my coat pocket. I felt the small, cold weight of a plastic flash drive slip from her fingers into mine. Her expression was completely serious, stripping away the sarcastic humor from the dinner table. "He is hiding money, girl," Jasmine whispered, her voice low and urgent. I pulled the employee termination logs and cross-referenced them with the severance payouts. The math does not add up at all. There is a massive black hole in his corporate accounts. Let us burn him. I gripped the small piece of plastic tightly inside my pocket, feeling a sudden, powerful electric rush of adrenaline. For the very first time since this nightmare began, I was not fighting this battle alone. I hurried out the heavy oak front door of my mother-in-law's house and walked quickly toward my car, parked on the dark street. Jasmine followed close behind me, her heels clicking sharply against the cold concrete. We climbed into my sedan, and I immediately locked the doors. The streetlights cast long shadows across the dashboard. I pulled my laptop from my work tote and rested it on the steering wheel. My hands were shaking slightly as I inserted the small plastic flash drive into the side port. The screen glowed brightly, illuminating our faces in the dark cabin. The files were encrypted with a standard corporate password protocol, but Weston was incredibly lazy. I typed in the name of his childhood dog again, and the folders unlocked instantly. Jasmine leaned over the center console, her eyes scanning the dense spreadsheets. "Open the third folder labeled Fourth Quarter Projections," she instructed, pointing at the screen. "Look at the employee termination logs." I clicked the file and a massive spreadsheet filled the screen. Jasmine had highlighted 15 names in bright red. "Those are the junior software developers he fired on Tuesday," she explained. "Weston claimed the company was severely bleeding cash, and he had to cut their salaries to keep the lights on. But look at the severance payout column. He recorded a severance package of 6 months' pay for each employee. I cross-referenced that with the actual payroll ledgers. He only paid them for 2 weeks. I stared at the numbers, doing the mental math instantly. He falsely recorded hundreds of thousands of dollars in fake severance payouts. That money never went to the employees, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. He used the layoffs as a smokescreen to free up massive amounts of corporate cash. "This is completely illegal," I continued. "He is artificially inflating his operational expenses on paper to lower his taxable income while simultaneously pocketing the actual cash difference. It is a classic phantom payroll scheme, but executed with absolute arrogance." Jasmine nodded grimly. "But where did the money go?" Jasmine asked, leaning closer. I opened the inbound investment ledger, tracing the cash flow. Weston always bragged about his anonymous angel investor keeping the company afloat. I dug into the corporate tax identification numbers listed next to the massive wire transfers. I ran a quick search through a public financial database I used for work. The screen refreshed, displaying the registered corporate entity. It was not an anonymous angel investor. It was a massive venture capital firm, and the primary portfolio director listed on the corporate filing was Bianca, the very same woman I had seen him kissing passionately at the restaurant on our 10-year anniversary. I showed Jasmine the photograph I had secretly snapped of them together just to confirm. My stomach dropped as the entire massive fraudulent scheme clicked into place. Bianca was using her powerful position at the venture capital firm to funnel millions of dollars of investor money directly into Weston's failing tech startup. In return, Weston was firing his own employees, falsifying the accounting ledgers, and sending huge portions of that money back to Bianca as illegal kickbacks, hiding the stolen cash in the offshore Cayman Islands account I found last night. It was a continuous loop of dirty money. She funded him, he stripped the company bare, and they both profited immensely from the destruction of innocent workers. It was textbook corporate fraud and embezzlement. "We have them, Jasmine," I breathed, feeling a fierce rush of absolute triumph. "This is concrete proof of massive federal financial crimes. They are both going to federal prison." Jasmine smiled a slow, dangerous smile. "Nobody plays my family for absolute fools," she said softly. especially not some arrogant tech bro who thinks he is smarter than everyone else in the room. We are going to burn his entire fake empire right to the ground. Before I could safely eject the flash drive, my cell phone suddenly began vibrating violently in the cup holder. The bright screen flashed, displaying the toll-free number of my primary bank. I picked it up and answered, putting the call on speakerphone so Jasmine could hear. "Hello, this is the Fraud Prevention Department," the automated voice announced clearly. "We are calling to inform you that your credit cards have just been reported stolen. All of your personal checking and savings accounts have been immediately frozen for your protection. Please contact your local branch during regular business hours to resolve this issue." The robotic line went completely dead. I stared at the dark phone screen in complete and utter stunned silence. Weston had realized I moved the money from our joint savings. He had initiated a total financial freeze, leaving me with absolutely no financial resources. I dropped Jasmine at her car. The drive home was a blur of streetlights. Weston thought freezing my accounts would paralyze me. He thought depriving me of money would force my submission. He was completely wrong. It only sharpened my focus. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the single lamp glowing ominously in the living room. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, dropping my work tote onto the bench. Weston was sitting perfectly still in the leather armchair. He was not clutching his bruised jaw anymore. He was not playing the exhausted, hard-working husband. The pathetic victim act had completely vanished. He looked up at me with cold, calculating eyes and a terrifyingly calm smile playing on his lips. "You are home late," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of any fake emotion. I walked into the center of the room, crossing my arms. "You froze my bank accounts," I stated flatly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me panic. "You reported my credit cards stolen today." He stood up slowly, casually adjusting the cuffs of his expensive dress shirt. "I did what I had to do, Natalie. You have been acting incredibly erratic lately, secretly moving our joint funds, logging into my private business accounts at dawn. You are clearly experiencing some sort of severe mental breakdown and trying to sabotage my startup." "Sabotage your startup?" I echoed, taking a step forward. "You mean the startup that is currently funneling illegal kickbacks to your mistress Bianca? You mean the startup that fired innocent people so you could pocket their severance packages?" Weston did not even flinch. His cold smile just grew wider. He reached over to the coffee table, picked up a thick manila envelope, and tossed it casually onto the rug at my feet. "You can spin whatever wild, paranoid delusions you want to the empty room," he said smoothly. "But the legal system tends to believe the successful tech chief executive over the hysterical, jealous wife. That is a temporary restraining order signed by a judge 2 hours ago. I filed an emergency petition claiming you are financially unstable and posing a direct threat to my business operations. You have exactly 10 minutes to pack a single bag and leave my house." "Your house?" I asked, my voice dropping dangerously low. "Yes, my house." He snapped his arrogant mask, fully slipping into place. "I am the one building an empire. I am the one securing $15 million funding rounds. I control the narrative, Natalie. I always have. Do you really think anyone will believe a mid-level accountant over a Silicon Valley visionary? Think about it carefully. 5 years ago, you spent 6 months designing that brilliant predictive algorithm business model. I took the entire binder, walked into a pitch meeting, and put my name on the cover. I secured my first round of seed funding. Everyone called me a genius, and you smiled and clapped from the sidelines because I told you that is how the game is played. You let me take the credit then, and you will let me take the house now because you do not have the spine to fight a public war." He stepped closer, towering over me. "The police will be here in 15 minutes to enforce the order if you are not gone. Pack your bag right now. Leave the house keys on the counter immediately." He expected me to scream. He expected me to drop to my knees and beg him not to throw me out into the street. He wanted the sick power trip of watching me break down in tears. I looked him dead in the eyes and felt absolutely nothing but cold, hard resolve. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my heavy keychain, and detached the house key. I tossed it onto the kitchen counter where it landed with a sharp metallic clatter. I do not need to pack a bag, I said calmly, turning away from him. I walked over to the hallway wall where a large framed wedding photograph hung perfectly centered. I reached up, lifted the heavy wooden frame off its metal hook, and tucked it firmly under my arm. Weston laughed a short, mocking sound. "You are taking a picture," he sneered. "How completely pathetic." I did not even answer him. I walked straight out the front door and into the cold night air without looking back. What Weston simply did not know was that I did not care about the photograph. Hidden securely inside the back of that frame, taped completely flat beneath the heavy cardboard backing, was the original notarized property deed to the house. A deed that legally listed me as the sole owner. I spent the night on the guest bed at Jasmine's house, the framed property deed resting safely on the nightstand. The next morning, I needed a strong black coffee before heading to the courthouse. I walked into a quiet upscale cafe near the financial district and ordered my drink. I found a small table in the corner and opened my laptop to review the encrypted files Jasmine and I had uncovered. I was deep into tracing the offshore Cayman Islands routing numbers when a shadow fell across my screen. I looked up and saw Bianca standing right in front of my table. She was wearing a tailored white designer suit, her blonde hair professionally blown out, and her wrists dripping in expensive gold jewelry, including the $15,000 Cartier watch my husband had bought her with my savings. She did not ask for permission to sit down. She simply pulled out the chair opposite me and gracefully crossed her legs. Her piercing blue eyes scanned my gray wool coat and plain black turtleneck. A small, condescending smile played on her lips. "You look exactly like I imagined Natalie," she said, her tone dripping with fake pity. "Practical, sensible, and completely forgettable. No wonder Weston got so incredibly bored." I slowly closed my laptop and folded my hands on the table. I did not raise my voice. "What do you want, Bianca?" She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a thick, crisp envelope. She placed it on the table and slid it carefully toward me. "I want to help you," she said smoothly, tapping her manicured fingernails against the paper. "Inside that envelope is a certified bank check for $500,000. There is also a non-disclosure agreement and a stack of uncontested divorce papers drafted by my legal team. You sign the papers, you take the money, and you walk away from Weston quietly." I stared at the envelope but did not reach for it. "You are trying to buy my own husband from me with the same money you both embezzled from his failing startup?" I asked, keeping my expression perfectly blank. Bianca let out a laugh. "Do not try to play out of your league, Natalie," she warned, leaning forward. "Weston and I operate on an entirely different level of the financial world. I went to Harvard. I manage $100 million portfolios before breakfast. You are a basic accountant who wears off the rack sweaters and clips grocery coupons. You do not have the resources, the pedigree, or the intellect to fight a protracted legal battle against someone like me. Take the $500,000. It is more money than you will ever see in your mundane life. Consider it a generous severance package for 10 years of mediocre service as a wife." I let her finish her arrogant speech. I let her bask in her own inflated sense of superiority. Then I reached forward and slowly pushed the thick envelope right back across the table until it touched her manicured hand. "I do not want your dirty money, Bianca," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "And I certainly do not need a lecture on finance from a portfolio director who commits blatant federal crimes." Her confident smile faltered just a fraction of an inch. "What are you talking about?" she snapped defensively. I leaned in, looking her dead in the eyes. "I am talking about the 3 Securities and Exchange Commission violations you committed in the last financial quarter," I replied, watching the color drain from her. "I am talking about Section 10b-5 of the Securities Exchange Act. You used your position at the venture firm to secretly funnel millions of investor dollars into Weston's company while hiding your relationship with the chief executive. That is an undisclosed conflict of interest. Then you accepted illicit kickbacks routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. That is wire fraud and laundering. You are not an Ivy League investor, Bianca. You are a common criminal in a white suit. Bianca turned completely pale, her polished facade violently cracked. Her eyes darted around the quiet coffee shop as if she expected federal agents to arrest her right then and there. She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. "Listen to me, you pathetic little bean counter," she hissed, leaning across the table with venom in her eyes. "You have no proof of anything. If you ever utter those ridiculous accusations to anyone, I will make sure your certified public accountant license is permanently revoked. I have powerful connections across this entire industry. I will destroy your career. I will bury you in endless litigation, and I will make sure you spend the rest of your pathetic life destitute." I left the coffee shop without another word, leaving Bianca sitting alone with her untouched $500,000 check. Her threat echoed in my mind, but I refused to let it slow me down. I walked the 2 blocks to my accounting firm, taking the elevator up to the 30th floor. I fully expected a normal morning of diving back into the encrypted files. Instead, the moment I stepped off the elevator, the receptionist gave me a tight, nervous smile and told me the managing partner was waiting for me in his office. I walked down the long glass hallway, my stomach tightening into a cold, hard knot. Mr. Henderson sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his face completely unreadable. He did not ask me to sit. He simply slid a thick printed document across the polished wood. I looked down and saw the official letterhead of our internal human resources department. "We received an anonymous tip early this morning, Natalie," he said, his voice clipped and highly professional. "The complaint alleges severe professional misconduct. Specifically, it accuses you of utilizing our proprietary forensic accounting software to conduct unauthorized corporate espionage against a prominent Silicon Valley technology firm." I stared at the paper. Bianca had not wasted a single second. She had weaponized her industry connections before I even finished my coffee. "This is a completely fabricated accusation," I stated firmly, keeping my voice steady. "The person who filed this complaint is currently under investigation for federal wire fraud and is actively trying to silence me to protect her own illegal assets." Mr. Henderson held up a hand to stop me. "Our firm cannot take sides in personal vendettas, Natalie. You know our strict compliance protocols better than anyone here. The anonymous tip included highly specific timestamps of your system logins from late last night. Logins you made from a non-secure personal network accessing restricted financial databases." He was right. I had used my work credentials to pull the public corporate tax filings on Weston and Bianca from my car while sitting with Jasmine. It was a minor technical violation of our remote access policy, but Bianca had brilliantly twisted it into a narrative of full-blown corporate espionage. "Until our internal compliance team can conduct a full, independent audit of your system activity, my hands are completely tied," he continued, his tone softening just a fraction. "Effective immediately. You are placed on unpaid administrative leave. I need your corporate security badge and your work laptop right now. You are strictly prohibited from accessing any client files or contacting anyone inside this building." I unclipped my security badge from my blazer and placed it carefully on his desk next to my laptop. I did not argue. Arguing would only make me look guilty and unstable, exactly how Weston and Bianca were trying to paint me. I walked out of the towering glass building with nothing but my personal phone and my purse. The cold morning wind hit my face. In less than 24 hours, my husband had frozen my bank accounts, thrown me out of my own house, and now his mistress had successfully stripped away my career and my professional reputation. They wanted me terrified. They wanted me broken and begging for that $500,000 settlement check. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person who understood exactly what we were up against. Jasmine answered on the first ring. "I am standing outside my office building," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "Bianca just got me suspended." "Give me 10 minutes, Jasmine replied smoothly, and the line went dead. Exactly 10 minutes later, Jasmine's sleek black SUV pulled sharply to the curb. I opened the passenger door and slid into the leather seat. Jasmine did not offer any empty apologies or sympathetic hugs. Instead, before I even had the chance to pull my seatbelt across my chest, she shoved a glowing silver iPad directly into my lap. "Forget about your temporary suspension," she ordered, putting the car back into gear and merging aggressively into the busy city traffic. "You can sue them for wrongful termination later. I just spent the last 2 hours digging through the public patent and trademark databases looking for the exact corporate structure of his tech startup. You need to check the primary code registry right now. The core intellectual property, the actual software algorithm that the entire venture capital firm is about to invest $15 million into, is not even registered in Weston's name." I stared down at the bright screen, completely mesmerized by the official government documents displayed right in front of me. The massive tech empire my husband constantly bragged about was built entirely on a dark foundation of absolute lies and stolen property. I stared at the glowing screen of the iPad as Jasmine navigated through the dense downtown traffic. The document displayed in high resolution was the official United States Patent and Trademark Office registry for the proprietary software algorithm. This was the exact predictive model that Bianca's venture capital firm was preparing to invest $15 million into by the end of the week. My eyes scanned past the dense technical specifications and went straight to the ownership assignment block at the bottom of the page. In any normal technology startup, this section would clearly list the primary corporate entity or the chief executive as the sole proprietor of the code. Instead, the registered owner of the entire intellectual property portfolio was listed as a separate independent limited liability holding company named Zenith Financial Solutions. I felt my breath suddenly catch in my throat. I knew that exact corporate name perfectly. Jasmine hit the brakes hard as a delivery truck cut aggressively across our lane. "You recognize the holding company name, right?" she asked, keeping her eyes firmly on the road. I leaned my head back against the cool leather seat, a sudden wave of sharp, absolute clarity washing over me. 5 years ago, Weston was desperately trying to launch his second business venture, which ultimately went completely bankrupt. He absolutely despised doing any sort of mundane administrative work. I clearly remember sitting at our dining room table late at night, surrounded by massive stacks of state legal forms, while he paced the hardwood floor. He constantly complained that a creative visionary should never have to deal with boring municipal tax codes and state incorporation documents. He practically forced me to draft every single piece of his foundational legal paperwork. To protect our personal home and savings from his incredibly risky business debts, I meticulously formed a completely independent legal holding company called Zenith Financial Solutions. I built a highly comprehensive intellectual property assignment template for him to use specifically for software development. He was explicitly supposed to update the entity names for each new venture he started. He never updated the template. I said aloud, the staggering reality of his absolute laziness finally hitting me. When he started this current tech company, he just copied and pasted the exact same legal document I drafted 5 years ago. He was in such a massive, desperate rush to look like a legitimate chief executive in front of his new, wealthy investors that he simply filed the original boilerplate paperwork without reading a single page. He completely failed to realize that the binding assignment clause still legally transferred all new intellectual property directly to Zenith Financial Solutions. Jasmine let out a loud, sharp laugh that echoed brightly in the small cabin of the SUV. "He is a total fraud who cannot even read his own legal contracts," she said, shaking her head in pure disbelief. "He really thought he was outsmarting everyone by stealing your original predictive algorithm, but he literally handed you the permanent legal rights on a silver platter." I quickly opened a new secure browser tab on the iPad and logged directly into the State Business Registry portal. My fingers flew across the digital keyboard as I typed in the holding company name to pull the current official operating agreement. The government database loaded instantly, confirming exactly what I already knew deep down in my gut. Zenith Financial Solutions was never legally dissolved after his second business failed miserably. It was still an active corporate entity in perfect standing with the state franchise tax board, and because Weston had stubbornly refused to pay the mandatory filing fees back then, I had paid them directly from my own personal checking account and listed myself as the sole registered agent and managing member. That single, seemingly minor administrative detail from half a decade ago was now the most powerful weapon I possessed. It meant I retained total, absolute financial control over every single business asset. The bright digital screen clearly displayed the current official capitalization table for the holding company. Weston did not own a single fractional share. Bianca and her corrupt venture capital firm did not own a single share either. The holding company that possessed the absolute exclusive legal rights to the multi-million-dollar software algorithm, the very foundation of Weston's entire fake tech empire, was exactly 100% legally owned by me. Weston was currently planning a massive, highly publicized press conference to sell $15 million worth of advanced technology that he did not even legally possess. I looked over at Jasmine, a cold, highly determined smile slowly spreading across my face. "Turn the car around right now," I told her firmly, locking the bright iPad screen. "We need to go see a corporate litigator immediately." As Jasmine parked her SUV, a dark sedan pulled up behind us, blocking the driveway. A tall man in a cheap, wrinkled suit stepped out holding a thick manila envelope. He called out my name and aggressively shoved a heavy stack of papers directly into my hands. "You have been formally served," he announced, driving away without another word. I ripped open the envelope standing right there on the cold sidewalk. It was an expedited order of eviction and a preliminary injunction for the immediate forced sale of my house. Weston's legal team had convinced a judge that the property was in imminent danger of foreclosure due to my supposed financial instability. The document demanded that I surrender all property access immediately so the house could be placed on the open market by Friday morning. Weston was moving at absolute lightning speed, trying to liquidate my house to cover his fraudulent tracks before his massive press conference. He thought I was defenseless without my bank accounts or my job. I marched inside and grabbed my heavy tote bag, placing the original notarized property deed securely inside a plastic folder. "I am going to the county courthouse," I told Jasmine. "I am going to file an emergency counter-injunction right now." I insisted on going alone. I needed the quiet train ride to clear my head. When I arrived at the massive granite building, the air felt deeply intimidating. I walked through the strict metal detectors and took the echoing marble staircase all the way up to the property records division. I slid Weston's ridiculous eviction notice across the glass counter, followed immediately by my original property deed. The veteran clerk looked completely bored until she meticulously compared the two legal documents. The deed clearly established me as the sole legal owner of the property, completely superseding his fraudulent marital asset claim. The clerk stamped my counter-injunction, freezing any attempt Weston could possibly make to sell or access the property. I walked away from the counter, feeling a massive weight finally lift from my tired shoulders. My home was completely secured against his greedy hands. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the property division, stepping back out into the expansive main lobby of the courthouse. The massive room was crowded with exhausted lawyers, anxious clerks, and angry couples arguing in hushed, tense tones. As I adjusted the heavy strap of my tote bag on my shoulder, a sharp, familiar voice cut straight through the chaotic background noise. "Well, if it is not the forensic accountant." I froze instantly. I knew that icy tone. I turned around and saw the elegant woman from the upscale Manhattan restaurant who had forced me to watch my husband get violently punched in the face. She was standing near a towering marble pillar, wearing a stunning tailored navy suit and holding a sleek leather briefcase. Her posture commanded absolute, undeniable authority. "You look far less shocked than the last time I saw you," she observed, walking slowly toward me with a measured, highly confident stride. I stood my ground, keeping my expression completely neutral and guarded. "Who exactly are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. You knew my specific profession. You knew about my private bank accounts. You sat next to me on purpose that night. She offered a small, incredibly sharp smile that did not reach her eyes. My name is Naomi, she said, stopping just a few feet away. I sat next to you that night because I wanted to see if the brilliant woman who built the financial architecture for a tech startup was smart enough to recognize a sinking ship. I stared at her, trying to place her face in the vast competitive landscape of corporate finance. You know Weston? I asked, narrowing my eyes. I know his mistress Bianca. Naomi corrected, her eyes flashing with a sudden intense coldness. And I know her far better than she realizes. I am the senior managing partner at the venture capital firm where she currently works. I am her boss. The staggering revelation hit me like a physical blow. The most powerful woman at the massive investment fund orchestrating the $15 million deal was standing right in front of me. I have suspected Bianca of embezzling fund capital for months, Naomi continued, her voice dropping to a strict, confidential whisper. But she is incredibly careful at hiding her digital tracks. I need concrete proof of her illegal kickbacks. I need the offshore routing numbers. You want to destroy her? I realized aloud, the puzzle pieces snapping together perfectly in my mind. Naomi looked right into my eyes with lethal determination. I want to utterly ruin her, she corrected softly. And I believe you and I can help each other do exactly that. I immediately called Jasmine from the courthouse steps. Less than 20 minutes later, her black SUV pulled up to the curb. When Jasmine saw me slide into the back seat, followed closely by an incredibly sharp older woman in a designer suit, she raised her eyebrows but did not ask any questions. Naomi simply gave Jasmine an address in the most exclusive high-rise district of the city. We rode the private glass elevator all the way up to the top floor. Naomi owned a sprawling modern penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire downtown skyline. It was the kind of massive generational wealth that Weston desperately pretended to possess. Naomi led us into a large open dining room and completely cleared off her massive frosted glass table. Let us get straight to work, she commanded, opening her heavy leather briefcase and pulling out thick stacks of highly confidential venture capital financial records. Jasmine placed her silver iPad on the glass table, displaying the fake employee termination logs and the severance payout discrepancies she had pulled from his human resources portal. I opened my laptop and pulled up the encrypted offshore bank routing numbers I had secured the night before. For the next 4 hours, the three of us functioned like a highly specialized corporate strike team. Naomi possessed the internal investment authorizations showing exactly when and how Bianca had bypassed the standard venture capital committee approvals to unilaterally wire millions of dollars into his failing startup. Jasmine had the exact dates and amounts of the phantom severance packages Weston used to artificially lower his corporate tax burden and free up massive amounts of stolen liquid cash. My job as the forensic accountant was to mathematically bridge the gap between their two distinct sets of financial data and prove premeditated collusion. I took a thick black marker and began writing directly on a large rolling whiteboard Naomi had pulled from her home office. I drew a complex timeline connecting every single illicit transaction. It was a perfectly executed circle of absolute corporate fraud. First, Bianca would approve a massive injection of venture capital cash, claiming it was for emergency research and development. Second, Weston would immediately fire a dozen junior employees claiming extreme financial hardship, but recording massive fake severance payouts on his corporate ledgers. Third, the stolen investor cash disguised as operational losses was quietly wired directly into the Cayman Islands shell company. And finally, the most damning piece of evidence of all emerged from the documents. Naomi provided secure internal emails proving that Bianca was secretly a silent partner in that exact offshore account, drawing a 50% cut of every single stolen dollar. We had them trapped on federal wire fraud, money laundering, and severe violations of the Securities Exchange Act. The paper trail was absolutely undeniable and completely legally binding. Naomi poured 3 glasses of expensive sparkling water and handed them to us. Her expression was fiercely satisfied as she looked at the detailed whiteboard. "You two are incredibly efficient," she praised, taking a slow, deliberate sip from her crystal glass. "I have employed teams of high-priced corporate auditors who could not unravel a financial web this complex in a week, let alone a single afternoon. But we have a very strict, highly pressing deadline to execute this trap properly. Bianca thinks she has completely outsmarted me and the entire executive board. She truly believes I am totally blind to her side deals and illegal kickbacks. In fact, she is so incredibly arrogant that she has organized a massive, highly publicized media event for this coming Friday morning." I looked at Naomi, my pulse quickening with a sudden intense rush of adrenaline. "What kind of media event?" I asked, setting my marker down on the heavy glass table. Naomi set her water glass down, her dark eyes narrowing with intense, ruthless calculation. "She and your completely foolish husband have invited every major technology journalist and prominent financial reporter on the West Coast," she explained, her voice dropping to a serious tone. "They are staging a massive press conference in Silicon Valley to publicly announce a $15 million Series A funding round. Bianca plans to sign the binding term sheet live on stage, cementing her status as a superstar portfolio director, while simultaneously making Weston look like the next great visionary chief executive. If she successfully signs that contract, the stolen money becomes legally untraceable through a maze of new corporate equity distributions. We have exactly 48 hours to let them build their fragile glass castle before we completely shatter it in front of the watching world and utterly ruin them both forever." I looked back at the whiteboard and smiled. The final stage of my perfect legal revenge was now set. Jasmine and I left Naomi's penthouse, feeling like we had just armed a massive financial bomb. The drive back to Jasmine's house was quiet, but charged with electric anticipation. We had the evidence, we had the timeline, and we had the ultimate ally in the venture capital firm. But when we pulled into Jasmine's driveway, the triumphant mood instantly vanished. Donovan's car was parked aggressively across the concrete pad. Jasmine put her vehicle in park and let out a long, exhausted sigh. "My husband is home," she said, gripping the steering wheel tightly, "and I guarantee his mother sent him to do her dirty work." We walked up the front steps and unlocked the door. Donovan was pacing the length of the living room hardwood floor. He looked incredibly stressed out, rubbing the back of his neck as he turned to face us. He did not even greet me. He walked straight toward his wife with a look of desperate pleading. "Jasmine, we need to stop this right now." He started, his voice tight with deep anxiety. "My phone has been blowing up all afternoon. Mom is having a complete meltdown and Weston is threatening to cut us completely out of the family business forever. You have to back off and stop encouraging Natalie to destroy my brother. He is going through an incredibly stressful corporate transition, and he just needs us to support him." I stood near the entryway holding my heavy tote bag, watching the man who had enabled his brother's toxic behavior for decades try to guilt-trip the only honest woman in his family. Jasmine dropped her car keys onto the glass console table with a sharp, loud clack. She did not yell. She did not raise her voice at all, but her tone was absolutely lethal. "Support him, Donovan," she asked, stepping closer to her husband until he was forced to look her directly in the eyes. "Are we supposed to support the man who is actively stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from his own failing company? Are we supposed to support the man who fired innocent, hardworking people right before the holidays to fund a secret offshore bank account? Or maybe you want me to support the man who is publicly humiliating his brilliant, loyal wife of 10 years for a cheap affair with a corrupt venture capitalist? Tell me exactly which part of his pathetic criminal lifestyle I am supposed to defend today." Donovan swallowed hard, looking incredibly uncomfortable in his own living room. "He is family. Jasmine," he argued weakly, repeating the exact same toxic excuse his mother had drilled into his head since childhood. "You do not just turn your back on blood when they make a mistake. We handle our problems privately behind closed doors. We do not try to burn each other to the ground in public. Jasmine let out a harsh, bitter laugh that echoed sharply in the quiet living room. A mistake, she repeated, shaking her head in pure, absolute disgust. Forgetting to take out the trash is a minor mistake, Donovan. Orchestrating a massive federal wire fraud scheme while freezing your wife's bank accounts and throwing her out onto the cold street is a calculated, malicious attack. But you cannot see that because you and your mother have spent your entire lives acting as human shields for that arrogant narcissist. She took another step forward, backing Donovan right into the heavy oak coffee table. You have spent 30 years shrinking yourself just so Weston could feel huge, she told him, her voice vibrating with absolute righteous anger. Your mother crowned him the golden child the moment he was born, and you accepted your role as the silent, obedient background character. Whenever he breaks a window, you rush to sweep up the glass so his hands do not get cut. Whenever he ruins a business, you hand him your own savings so he does not look poor. You are so absolutely terrified of upsetting the delicate toxic balance of this family that you are willing to let him destroy an innocent woman just to keep the peace at the Sunday dinner table. Well, I am not playing the good, quiet daughter-in-law anymore, Donovan. Your brother is a total fraud and a criminal, and I am going to help Natalie bury his fake empire completely. Donovan looked completely defeated. His shoulders slumped, and he ran both of his hands over his tired face. You are taking this entirely the wrong way, he mumbled defensively, looking down at the floor to avoid his wife's furious glare. Weston is not trying to destroy anyone. He is just trying to secure his own future and stabilize his personal life after everything fell apart. He actually wants to settle down permanently. He is even spending this entire weekend rushing to move Bianca's belongings into the house so they can officially start fresh together. The room went completely dead silent. Jasmine slowly turned her head to look at me, her eyes wide with shock. I stood perfectly still, my blood running absolutely cold in my veins. My husband, the man who had just served me with fraudulent eviction papers to sell my home, was actually using those legal documents as a massive smokescreen. He was not selling the property at all. He was illegally moving his millionaire mistress directly into my house this very weekend. I gripped my heavy tote bag, preparing for absolute total war. I did not waste a single second after hearing Donovan casually reveal Weston's absolutely disgusting plan. I left Jasmine's living room immediately and spent the entire ride back to the guest bedroom making rapid, intense phone calls. Weston genuinely thought he had until the weekend to quietly move his corrupt mistress into my personal sanctuary. He severely underestimated how fast a highly motivated forensic accountant could mobilize her resources. By 6 o'clock the very next morning, I was standing on the cold front lawn of my property, holding a steaming cup of black coffee, and watching a fleet of unmarked black tactical vehicles pull sharply into my driveway. I had not hired a standard residential neighborhood watch service. Using the emergency funds I had legally secured before Weston completely froze our joint banking accounts, I hired a premier private security firm that specialized exclusively in high-threat corporate asset protection and executive defense. A tall, incredibly broad-shouldered man stepped out of the lead vehicle, introducing himself as the director of operations. He did not waste any time on polite small talk, which I deeply appreciated. I immediately handed him the thick plastic folder containing my original notarized property deed and the freshly stamped counter injunction I had just secured from the county courthouse. The director reviewed the dense legal documents, meticulously verifying without a shadow of a doubt that I was the absolute sole legal owner of the entire estate. He confirmed that Weston had zero legal standing to enter the premises, regardless of his marital status. Once the strict legal parameters were established, the director gave a sharp nod to his highly trained team, and my property was instantly thrown into a total operational lockdown. The speed and precision of the security contractors was absolutely breathtaking. Within 2 solid hours, they had completely removed and replaced every single lock on the exterior doors, swapping the standard brass fixtures for high-grade biometric deadbolts. They physically gutted the central alarm panel in the hallway, completely erasing Weston's old passcodes and installing a new encrypted network that sent live high-definition video alerts directly to my personal cell phone. But they did not stop at the physical doors. The security team rapidly erected heavy steel temporary fencing across the wide mouth of the driveway, securing the perimeter with a massive industrial steel padlock. Two heavily armed security contractors, dressed in intimidating black tactical uniforms, took up permanent positions directly at the newly fortified front gate. They held a heavy metal clipboard containing a strictly enforced zero-tolerance trespass warning list. There were only two names written in bold red ink on that legal document: Weston and Bianca. Once the perimeter was fully secured and tested, I quietly left the property through the dense backwoods and drove straight back to Jasmine's house. I sat at her wide kitchen island, opened my laptop, and pulled up the live security camera feeds. The high-definition screens displayed every single angle of my fortified house. The trap was perfectly set. Now all I had to do was wait for his massive ego to walk right into a concrete wall. I did not have to wait very long. At exactly 2 o'clock that afternoon, a massive white moving truck turned the corner and rumbled slowly down my quiet residential street. Right behind the heavy commercial truck was Weston's sleek, new, expensive sports car. He parked right against the curb and stepped out wearing a crisp designer polo shirt. Bianca emerged from the passenger side wearing oversized luxury sunglasses and holding a small, expensive dog. They were both smiling widely, laughing together, as they walked confidently toward the driveway, expecting to stroll right through the front door and claim my life as their own. They did not even notice the heavy steel barricade until they were standing right in front of it. Weston grabbed the metal gate, rattling it aggressively in total confusion. Before he could even shout a demand, the two armed security guards stepped out from the shadows of the large oak trees. The lead guard completely ignored Weston's arrogant posture and simply pressed a formal legal trespass warning directly against Weston's chest. "You are currently trespassing on highly secured private property," the guard stated in a loud, booming voice that echoed down the quiet street. "You have exactly 30 seconds to return to your vehicle and depart the premises, or you will be immediately detained and turned over to local law enforcement." Weston completely lost his mind. His face turned a dangerous shade of dark purple. He screamed at the top of his lungs, kicking the heavy steel gate and violently throwing his expensive sunglasses onto the concrete street, while Bianca backed away in pure, absolute terror. I sat at Jasmine's kitchen island watching the security feed on my laptop screen. Weston was unhinged, violently kicking the steel gate while Bianca stood on the sidewalk clutching her purse, looking horrified. I watched him pull his phone from his pocket, pacing furiously as he dialed 911. He pointed at the massive armed guards, gesturing wildly toward the house. He thought local police would show up and arrest my security team on his command. I closed my laptop, slid it into my tote bag, and grabbed my keys. Jasmine did not try to stop me. She gave me a sharp nod of approval. The drive from her house took less than 5 minutes. As I turned onto my street, the flashing red and blue lights of two police cruisers were illuminating the neighborhood. I parked my car behind one of the cruisers and stepped onto the cold pavement. Weston saw me instantly. He pointed a shaking finger in my direction, his face twisted with rage. "There she is!" he screamed at the approaching police officers. "That is my unstable wife. She illegally changed the locks, she hired mercenaries, and stole my property. I demand that you arrest her immediately and force those guards to open my gate." The two officers exchanged a weary glance before walking slowly toward me. They looked highly skeptical of his dramatic screaming. "Ma'am," one of the officers asked politely, resting his hand on his duty belt, "this gentleman claims you unlawfully barricaded him out of his primary residence. Can you explain exactly what is going on here?" I did not raise my voice or act defensive. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the plastic folder. I handed the official documents directly to the officer. That man is my estranged husband, I explained calmly. Last night he served me with a fraudulent eviction notice, claiming he had the legal right to sell this property to cover his failing business debts. However, as you will see on that notarized property deed, I am the sole owner of this estate. My name is the only name on the title. Furthermore, the second document is a freshly stamped counter-injunction from the county courthouse, barring him from entering or selling the premises. The second officer stepped closer, shining his tactical flashlight onto the legal paperwork. Weston stood a few feet away, crossing his arms with a smug, arrogant smile. He believed his tailored clothes and chief executive persona would win them over. He thought the police would dismiss my documents as fake. Bianca stood behind him, adjusting her oversized sunglasses, clearly embarrassed by the public spectacle taking place in the middle of a quiet residential street. The officers took their time reading through the property deed and the judge's signature on the injunction. The lead officer finally handed the folder back to me with a respectful nod. He turned to face Weston, and his expression grew stern. "Sir," the officer said, his voice loud enough for the street to hear, "these legal documents are absolutely flawless. This property is entirely in her name, and she has a valid court order keeping you off the premises. This is strictly a civil matter, and we cannot intervene on your behalf. You have no legal right to be here." Weston dropped his arms, his mouth falling open in pure shock. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice cracking with panic. "I am her husband. Half of everything she owns is legally mine. You cannot just let her kick me out into the street." The officer stepped forward, invading Weston's personal space, pointing a firm finger toward his expensive sports car. "I am telling you to leave this property right now, sir," the officer warned strictly. "If you continue to cause a public disturbance or try to bypass that gate, we will arrest you for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Get in your vehicle and leave immediately." Bianca grabbed Weston by the arm, pulling him toward the car. "Stop making a scene, Weston," she hissed angrily, her polished image shattering in front of the neighbors. "Let us just go." Weston violently yanked his arm away from her grip. His face was flushed with absolute humiliation. He glared at me with venom in his eyes. "You think you won?" he screamed wildly, his voice echoing down the street. "You think this stupid house means anything to me? You can keep this pathetic piece of real estate, Natalie. By Friday afternoon, I am going to be worth $50 million. I will buy 10 houses just like this one, and you will be nothing." He turned aggressively, shoving his way past the officers, and got into his car, leaving his moving truck sitting completely useless on the curb. I watched Weston's sports car speed away down the street. The massive moving truck remained awkwardly parked against the curb, a silent monument to his failure. I thanked the police officers and gave a nod of appreciation to my armed security team. They resumed their strict patrol of the perimeter, ensuring no one breached the heavy steel gates. I drove back to Jasmine's house feeling a profound sense of total control. The physical boundary was firmly drawn. Now it was finally time to tighten the financial noose around their necks. The next morning was Thursday, exactly one day before their massive press conference. I sat at Jasmine's dining table with a cup of coffee, monitoring financial news networks on my laptop. At exactly 9 o'clock, my cell phone rang. It was Naomi calling from her secure office line. Her voice was sharp and laced with deep satisfaction. "The first domino officially fell," she announced over the speakerphone. "I submitted the whistleblower report to the Securities and Exchange Commission last night using the exact blueprints we mapped out. They did not waste a single minute." Naomi explained the chaos unfolding at her headquarters. At 8 in the morning, federal regulators officially notified the venture capital firm that a formal inquiry had launched into Bianca's investment portfolios. As the senior managing partner, Naomi immediately complied with the federal request and suspended Bianca's trading privileges. Bianca was entirely locked out of the firm's primary financial network. "She is trapped inside her glass office," Naomi reported, her tone turning cold. "Her corporate accounts are completely frozen pending the internal audit. She is in a state of absolute panic, pacing the floor and making encrypted phone calls. She thinks she can hide the embezzled funds before federal agents secure warrants to search her offshore accounts." Because Bianca's financial assets were suddenly paralyzed, she needed immediate liquid collateral to protect herself. She needed the proprietary software algorithm legally transferred into her name right now. Naomi forwarded me a chain of frantic internal emails Bianca desperately tried to send before her server access was terminated. In those emails, she explicitly demanded Weston accelerate the intellectual property transfer immediately. She told him the entire $15 million funding round was in severe jeopardy unless she held sole legal ownership of the software code by the end of the day. Weston was entirely dependent on Bianca's venture capital money to keep his fake empire from collapsing. He had absolutely no other choice but to comply with her panicked demands. Less than an hour after Naomi ended our incredibly satisfying phone call, my own phone began buzzing violently against the wooden table. It was Weston calling. I let it go straight to voicemail. He called again. I ignored it. Then a rapid, relentless flood of text messages began pouring into my screen. Natalie, I need you to answer the phone right now, the first message read. The second message arrived seconds later. The State Business Registry portal is completely locked. I am trying to initiate the standard corporate equity transfer for the new investor term sheet, but the system is demanding the primary administrative verification code. Where did you put the master password? I stared at the glowing screen, reading his frantic words over and over again. Weston had finally attempted to log into the state intellectual property database. He had finally tried to officially transfer the multi-million-dollar software rights over to his mistress to save their fraudulent scheme. And in doing so, he had violently crashed headfirst into the massive invisible brick wall I had built 5 years ago. He had never bothered to learn the administrative login credentials for Zenith Financial Solutions because he always viewed administrative work as beneath his visionary status. He simply assumed his childhood dog's name would unlock the state government portals just like it unlocked his personal laptop. He was completely wrong. The master password belonged exclusively to me. The dual-factor authentication was tied directly to my personal cell phone. He was entirely locked out of his own fake business. I watched the text messages turn from demanding to completely unhinged. "Stop playing childish games, Natalie," he wrote, his extreme panic practically vibrating through the digital text. "Millions of dollars are on the line today. Give me the master password immediately, or I swear I will ruin your entire life." I smiled, taking a slow, calm sip of my hot coffee. He still thought he held the power. He had absolutely no idea that I had already taken everything from him. I turned my phone completely off and slid it across the smooth wooden table. He could not access the critical registry without my secure laptop and my passwords, and I was never going to give them to him. Thursday evening cast long, dark shadows across Jasmine's quiet neighborhood. We sat in her living room eating takeout in absolute silence. The tension in the air was incredibly thick. We knew Weston was totally cornered, and a cornered narcissist is an incredibly dangerous animal. He had less than 12 hours before the massive press conference, and without the master password to Zenith Financial Solutions, his entire fraudulent empire was guaranteed to collapse on live television. I kept my phone completely powered down, refusing to give him any avenue of manipulation. He needed my secure work laptop to bypass the dual-factor authentication, and he knew I was staying with his sister-in-law. At 2 o'clock, the piercing chime of Jasmine's perimeter security system echoed sharply through the dark house. We were both wide awake, sitting at the kitchen island drinking black tea. Jasmine instantly grabbed her phone and opened the live camera feed. The infrared night vision displayed a dark, hooded figure creeping slowly across her manicured backyard. The figure moved awkwardly, clearly trying to avoid the motion sensor floodlights. As the man stepped closer to the back patio, the camera caught a clear angle of his face. It was Weston. He looked completely unhinged, wearing dark clothes and clutching a metal crowbar. He was actually trying to break into his own brother's house. Jasmine did not panic. She simply set her phone face down on the marble counter and let out a low, dark chuckle. "He really is the dumbest man in Silicon Valley," she whispered. shaking her head in absolute disbelief. He actually thinks he can break in and steal your laptop. I reached for my phone to dial 911, but Jasmine gently pushed my hand away. Do not call the police yet, she instructed, her voice deadly calm. If they arrest him right now, he just gets a minor breaking and entering charge. We need him completely free to walk onto that stage tomorrow morning. Let him come inside. Jasmine slid off her bar stool and walked to the hallway closet. When she returned, she held a solid aluminum baseball bat, gripping it tightly. We stood completely still in the dark kitchen, watching the live feed as Weston wedged the metal crowbar into the sliding glass patio door. He forced the lock with a loud, sharp crack that echoed in the silent house. He slid the door open and stepped into the living room, his breathing heavy and erratic. We anticipated his desperate stupidity hours ago. Sitting right in the middle of the kitchen island, perfectly illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the blinds, was a sleek silver laptop. It looked exactly like my secure work computer. Weston spotted it immediately. He shoved the crowbar into his jacket pocket and lunged toward the counter, grabbing the silver device with greedy, trembling hands. A triumphant smile spread across his bruised face. He turned to leave, but before he could step toward the patio door, Jasmine reached over and flipped the main kitchen light switch. The room flooded with blinding bright light. Weston froze, completely paralyzed like a deer caught in headlights. Jasmine stood 10 feet away, resting the heavy aluminum bat casually on her shoulder. Her expression was absolutely terrifying. Put the laptop down, Weston, she commanded, her voice echoing with lethal authority. Or I swear I will shatter your kneecaps right here on my kitchen floor. Weston clutched the laptop tightly against his chest, his eyes darting frantically around the room. He looked at the bat, then at the open patio door. You do not understand, Jasmine, he stammered, his voice cracking with pure panic. I need this computer to save the family legacy. You are trying to ruin me. Jasmine took one deliberate, menacing step forward, raising the heavy bat. You have exactly 3 seconds to get out of my house before I demonstrate my batting average, she warned, her tone completely devoid of any mercy. 1, 2. Weston did not wait for 3. He let out a pathetic, terrified gasp, spun around, and sprinted desperately toward the open patio door. He stumbled over the metal track, nearly dropping the laptop, but managed to keep his balance. He ran blindly into the dark backyard, crashing through the wooden side gate and disappearing into the night, clutching his stolen prize. Jasmine lowered the baseball bat and calmly walked over to lock the shattered patio door. I stood in the cold kitchen, feeling a massive surge of pure adrenaline. I cannot believe you just let him steal my computer, I breathed, my heart pounding against my ribs. Jasmine turned around and flashed a brilliant, highly satisfied smile. I did not let him steal your computer, Natalie, she replied, walking back to the island. Your actual secure laptop is safely locked inside my heavy steel floor safe. That silver machine he just risked a major felony to steal is an old, wiped decoy laptop from my human resources department. And before we left the house this afternoon, I installed a military-grade keystroke logger and a hidden remote access Trojan on its hard drive. The moment he connects that stolen machine to the internet to try and access the registry, we will have complete, unrestricted visibility into every single thing he types, every password he enters, and every desperate email he sends to his mistress. Jasmine and I did not sleep at all that night. We sat at the kitchen island, staring intensely at the tracking software dashboard glowing on my secure laptop screen. At exactly 3 in the morning, a bright green notification bar flashed across the dark screen. The decoy laptop had successfully connected to a public wireless network at a cheap motel on the edge of the city. Weston was online. I immediately initiated a secure video conference call with Naomi. She answered on the first ring, sitting in her luxurious home office, looking completely ready for blood. I shared my screen, giving both Jasmine and Naomi a front-row seat to my husband's absolute destruction. The military-grade keystroke logger we installed operated flawlessly. Every single time Weston pressed a key on the stolen decoy laptop, the exact corresponding character appeared in real time on our monitor. It was like watching a ghost write his own highly detailed confession. We watched as he frantically opened a web browser and navigated directly to the State Business Registry portal. He typed in his own name. Access denied. He tried his childhood dog's name. Access denied. He tried 6 variations of his birth date. The system locked him out completely. A heavy, deeply satisfying silence filled Jasmine's kitchen as we watched the cursor blink rapidly on the screen. He finally realized that stealing the physical computer did absolutely nothing to bypass the dual-factor authentication I had legally established 5 years ago. He was completely trapped outside his own fake empire. Driven by pure, unadulterated panic, Weston opened his secure email client. He began drafting a message directly to Bianca. He was typing so fast and furiously that the tracking software captured dozens of frantic spelling errors as he poured his entire criminal conspiracy onto the digital page. Bianca, we have a massive problem. He typed his digital words, sealing his fate. Natalie legally owns the holding company that controls the software intellectual property. I cannot transfer the algorithm into your name before the press conference tomorrow. You have to delay the SEC audit immediately. He paused, deleting a sentence before typing something infinitely worse. If federal regulators look closely at the fourth quarter operational budget, they are going to see the fake employee severance packages. They will trace the phantom payroll directly to the Cayman Islands shell company. You have to move the kickback money out of the offshore account right now before they freeze your assets too. If this funding round collapses, we are both going to federal prison. Naomi let out a sharp, incredibly cold laugh over the video call. He just handed us the smoking gun, wrapped in a perfect digital bow, she said, her eyes gleaming with ruthless satisfaction. I am forwarding this exact transcript directly to the federal investigators handling her internal audit. This explicitly establishes premeditated financial collusion and wire fraud. Bianca will be walking onto that stage tomorrow completely oblivious to the fact that she is already a condemned woman. I clicked a button securely downloading the encrypted keystroke log and backing it up to 3 separate external drives. Weston had officially signed his own digital death warrant. Naomi ended the video call to prepare the final legal trap for the morning. Jasmine closed her laptop, stretching her arms high above her head with a victorious sigh. It was finally over. We had every single piece of the puzzle. Just as I stood up to pour a fresh cup of hot black coffee, my personal cell phone buzzed violently against the cool marble counter. It was an unknown local number. I hesitated for a moment before picking it up. Hello, I answered, cautious in the quiet kitchen. Is this Natalie? A deep, unfamiliar male voice asked through the speaker. I did not confirm my identity, waiting for him to explain himself. The man took a long, slow, heavy breath. We have not formally met, but we have definitely been in the same room. He continued, his tone dark and intensely focused. I am the man who threw a glass of red wine into your husband's face and broke his jaw at the Manhattan restaurant last week. My grip tightened heavily on the cold plastic phone. Bianca's former fiancé. I have spent the last 6 days tearing Bianca's entire life apart, he explained, his voice laced with pure, bitter betrayal. I know you are actively building a legal case against them, and I want to help you burn them to the ground. She was incredibly careless with her private safe. I just found her personal leather ledger. I have the exact secret offshore bank account routing numbers and the total balance of the stolen venture capital funds, and I am willing to give you everything right now. I accepted the information from the man on the phone without a single ounce of hesitation. Within 5 minutes, my secure inbox chimed with high-resolution photographs of Bianca's handwritten leather ledger. Jasmine and I huddled over the glowing laptop screen, meticulously cross-referencing the handwritten offshore routing numbers with the digital wire transfers we had already pulled from Weston's fake payroll accounts. It was an absolutely flawless match, confirming our suspicions. Every stolen dollar was meticulously documented in Bianca's arrogant handwriting. We now had her exact account numbers, her hidden balances, and the explicit proof that she was funding her luxurious lifestyle with embezzled venture capital cash. I forwarded the final batch of evidence directly to Naomi, who immediately passed it along to her waiting federal contacts. The trap was completely sealed. By the time the sun began to rise on Friday morning, I felt no exhaustion. I was running entirely on cold, calculated adrenaline. Today was the day of the massive press conference. Today, Weston and Bianca planned to announce their $15 million funding round to the world. I took a long, hot shower, washing away the stress of the past week. When I stepped out, I did not put on my usual sensible wool coat. Today required an entirely different kind of armor. Jasmine lent me a stunning tailored emerald green power suit. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, tight style and applied a sharp coat of dark red lipstick. I looked into the mirror and saw a woman who was no longer playing the quiet, supportive background character. I was the architect of their destruction. I walked into the kitchen where Jasmine was waiting, wearing her sharp black corporate attire. She handed me a fresh cup of dark roast coffee and a warm butter croissant. "We have exactly 2 hours until the live broadcast begins," she announced, checking her watch. Naomi just sent a secure message confirming that her private car is waiting downstairs to take us directly to the auditorium. Just as I took a sip of my coffee, my cell phone vibrated violently on the marble counter. I had turned it back on, anticipating the morning chaos. I looked down at the bright screen and saw a new incoming text message from my mother-in-law, Brenda. I unlocked the screen and opened the message. It was a high-definition photograph taken inside the VIP green room at the press conference venue. Weston was standing proudly in the center of the frame, wearing a custom Italian suit paid for with stolen money. His bruised jaw was carefully covered with expensive stage makeup. Standing right beside him, clinging to his arm with a bright artificial smile, was Bianca. She was wearing a stunning white designer dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled and the $15,000 Cartier watch glittering brightly on her wrist. They looked like the absolute pinnacle of modern success, completely unaware of their impending doom. Beneath the arrogant photograph, Brenda had typed a long, cruel message. "I thought you should see what true success actually looks like, Natalie." She wrote, her words dripping with pure, toxic spite. "Weston is about to change the entire tech industry today, and he finally has a beautiful, sophisticated partner who understands his absolute genius. Real women support successful men. They do not try to drag them down with petty jealousy and intense financial paranoia. You should have just signed the loan documents when I told you to. Now you get to spend the rest of your miserable life watching from the absolute bottom while my incredible son builds a massive empire without you." I read the hateful message twice. A week ago, those incredibly cruel words would have shattered my heart and made me completely question my own self-worth. I would have cried alone in the dark, wondering exactly why my 10 years of absolute loyalty meant absolutely nothing to this toxic family. But standing in Jasmine's kitchen, wearing my emerald suit and holding the total, undeniable power to destroy their entirely fraudulent lives, I felt nothing but cold, hard amusement. Brenda was standing right on the upper deck of the Titanic, proudly taking photographs of the approaching iceberg. I set my coffee cup down on the marble counter. I did not type a long, emotional paragraph defending myself. I did not argue with her toxic delusions or try to explain the massive federal crimes her golden child had committed. I simply kept my response incredibly brief and completely devastating. I tapped the digital keyboard and typed my text message to her. "Watch the live stream very closely, Brenda. You are going to want to sit down." I hit send, turned my phone on silent, and walked out the door with Jasmine. Naomi's private car pulled up to the rear loading dock of the massive Silicon Valley Convention Center. The sheer scale of the event was staggering. Weston had spared absolutely no expense using stolen funds to rent out the premier auditorium. Jasmine and I stepped out of the black town car and were immediately met by Naomi. She handed us 2 laminated all-access production badges. We walked quietly through the bustling backstage corridors, avoiding the VIP green room entirely, and taking our positions in the dark wings just off the main stage. From our hidden vantage point, I had a perfect view of the entire auditorium. Every single seat was filled. The room buzzed with the energetic chatter of prominent tech journalists, financial reporters, and wealthy angel investors. Camera lenses flashed continuously, reflecting off the polished stage floor. Behind the sleek modern podium, a massive high-definition LED screen displayed the combined logos of Weston's fraudulent startup and Bianca's venture capital firm. It looked like the absolute pinnacle of corporate success. But standing in the shadows, I knew it was nothing more than a fragile house of cards waiting for a single breath of wind. At exactly 10 o'clock, the house lights dimmed, and a heavy, bass-heavy introductory video played across the massive screens. The cinematic music swelled, filling the large room with artificial excitement. When the video finally ended, the crowd erupted into polite applause. Weston confidently walked out from the opposite side of the stage. He looked every bit the billionaire visionary he desperately pretended to be. His custom Italian suit fit perfectly, and his stride was filled with overwhelming arrogance. He stepped up to the acrylic podium, gripping the edges, and looking out over the sea of reporters with a deeply practiced smile. "Thank you all for being here today." Weston began, his voice booming clearly through the state-of-the-art sound system. "5 years ago, I had a vision. I saw a future where predictive software algorithms could revolutionize the way we interact with global financial markets. People called me crazy. People told me it was completely impossible. Some people even actively tried to hold me back. I felt my jaw clench in the dark wings, knowing exactly who he was talking about. He was trying to rewrite history, painting me as the villain of his incredible success story. But true innovation requires absolute sacrifice. He continued, his tone turning sickeningly sweet and highly dramatic. And it requires finding the right people who genuinely believe in your genius. Weston turned gracefully toward the side of the stage, extending his hand. "Today, I am not just announcing a $15 million Series A funding round," he declared to the flashing cameras. "I am publicly introducing the brilliant woman who made this entire vision a reality. She is my lead investor, my most trusted advisor, my muse, and my true partner in every sense of the word. Please welcome the senior portfolio director of the fund, Bianca." The audience applauded loudly as Bianca walked onto the stage. She looked absolutely radiant in her tailored white dress, waving to the journalists like a Hollywood celebrity walking the red carpet. She walked right up to Weston, and they shared a deeply manufactured look of professional admiration before turning back to face the crowd. A production assistant hurried onto the stage carrying a sleek leather binder containing the massive investment term sheet. He placed it carefully onto a small glass table positioned directly center stage, flanked by two expensive modern chairs. Weston and Bianca walked over to the table and sat down. The press photographers moved closer, capturing every single angle of the historic signing. Bianca opened the heavy leather binder and smoothed her hand over the crisp legal paper. She looked out at the audience, flashing her perfect white teeth for the photographs. She reached over and picked up a heavy gold fountain pen, twirling it elegantly in her fingers. "This is the moment that changes absolutely everything," Weston said, leaning directly into his lapel microphone so the entire room could hear his final triumphant words. Bianca lowered her head, bringing the gold tip of the pen down toward the signature line. The massive room was practically holding its collective breath, waiting for the ink to hit the page. And then it happened. Just as the gold nib was a fraction of a millimeter away from the paper, a loud, sharp electronic pop echoed violently through the massive auditorium. Weston's lapel microphone went completely dead. The ambient background music playing softly through the expensive speakers instantly vanished, and the massive glowing LED screens behind them, the ones proudly displaying their corporate logos, abruptly cut out, leaving the entire back of the stage completely pitch black. The sudden heavy silence in the crowded room was absolutely deafening. Bianca froze, her pen hovering completely motionless in midair as a huge wave of deep confusion rippled through the entire audience. The silence in the massive auditorium hung heavy and suffocating. Weston tapped his lapel microphone frantically, trying to force it back to life. He looked completely panicked, waving his hands at the audio engineers in the sound booth at the back of the room. Bianca remained frozen in her chair, her golden pen still hovering above the dark leather binder. The wealthy investors and tech journalists began murmuring among themselves, the collective confusion quickly turning into a restless, low roar. Flashbulbs stopped firing. The manufactured illusion of absolute perfection was shattering right in front of their eyes. Then the sharp, commanding click of high heels echoed through the dark room. The rhythmic footsteps sounded exactly like a very loudly ticking clock. From the side of the stage, exactly where Jasmine and I were hiding, Naomi stepped fully into the spotlight. She did not rush. She walked with the slow, calculated precision of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. She was holding a sleek wireless microphone in her right hand and a thick manila folder in her left. The murmurs in the audience instantly died down as everyone recognized the senior managing partner of the incredibly powerful venture capital firm. Weston let out a nervous laugh of relief, completely misreading the situation. "Naomi," he called out, his voice projecting awkwardly into the silent room. "Thank God you are here. We are experiencing some sort of massive technical malfunction." Naomi ignored him entirely. She walked straight past the acrylic podium and stopped right in front of the small glass table where Bianca was sitting. Naomi raised the wireless microphone to her lips. "There is no technical malfunction, Weston," she announced, her voice echoing with absolute authority through the state-of-the-art speakers. "I personally ordered the production crew to cut the power. This press conference is completely over." Bianca finally lowered her pen, her perfect smile twisting into a look of genuine anger. "Naomi, what on earth are you doing?" she hissed under her breath, standing up from her chair. "We are in the middle of a massive funding announcement. You are embarrassing the entire firm in front of the national press." Naomi turned to face the audience, looking out over the sea of confused reporters. "My name is Naomi, and I am the senior managing partner of the Venture Capital Fund," she stated clearly, ensuring every single journalist recorded her words. "We invited you all here today to announce a $15 million investment. However, I must issue a formal immediate retraction. Our firm will not be investing a single dollar into this startup." The auditorium erupted into absolute chaos. Reporters shouted questions, scrambling to record the massive breaking news. Weston turned completely pale, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. Naomi held up her hand, demanding total silence. The room quieted immediately. She turned her cold, piercing gaze back to Bianca. Effective immediately, Bianca is officially terminated from her position as portfolio director, she declared, the words slicing through the air like a razor. She is being publicly fired for gross corporate negligence, extreme financial fraud, and the direct embezzlement of millions of dollars in venture capital funds. Bianca gasped, clutching the edge of the glass table to steady herself. "You are completely insane!" she screamed, her polished facade shattering into a million jagged pieces. "You have absolutely no proof of those ridiculous accusations. I am a top-tier executive. I will sue you for everything you own." Naomi simply opened the manila folder and pulled out a stack of printed emails. "I have the exact encrypted routing numbers for your secret offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands." Naomi replied, her voice dripping with lethal calm. "I have the handwritten ledgers you foolishly left in your personal safe. I even have the panicked emails Weston sent you from a cheap motel room at 3 o'clock this morning, explicitly begging you to hide the stolen kickback money before the federal regulators arrive. In fact, the Securities and Exchange Commission has already frozen every single one of your financial assets as of 8 o'clock this morning." Weston backed away from the table, his eyes darting frantically toward the exit. He realized the trap had completely closed around him. He looked at Bianca with absolute terror. But Bianca did not run. Driven by sheer, absolute desperation and blinding arrogance, she grabbed the wireless microphone sitting on the table. She gripped it so tightly, her knuckles turned completely white. You cannot fire me, Naomi, she screamed, her voice cracking with pure hysterical rage. You need me. This entire firm desperately needs me. You cannot afford to lose the predictive algorithm. I am the only person who holds the exclusive intellectual property rights to Weston's multi-million-dollar software. Bianca's voice cracked with desperate hysteria as she clung to her final defense. She stood pointing a shaking finger at Naomi. You cannot do this without me, Bianca shouted, her chest heaving under the bright stage lights. The entire $15 million valuation rests entirely on the predictive algorithm. And I am the only portfolio director who negotiated the exclusive intellectual property rights. If you fire me, you lose the software and the board will crucify you. Weston eagerly nodded, stepping closer to Bianca. He desperately grabbed onto her delusion like a drowning man. She is right, Naomi, he argued, his voice trembling but attempting to sound authoritative. The venture capital contract is contingent upon my software. My algorithm is going to change the global financial market. You cannot touch us because we control the core asset. The auditorium filled with the frantic clicking of camera shutters. Journalists typed furiously, documenting the unprecedented corporate meltdown. Naomi did not look threatened by their desperate ultimatum. She simply lowered her microphone and smiled a small, satisfied smile. She turned her head slightly, looking directly into the dark wings of the stage, where I was waiting patiently. That was my cue. I took a deep breath, feeling the tailored fabric of my emerald green power suit against my skin. I did not walk out with the hesitation of a betrayed wife. I walked out with the absolute, undeniable authority of a woman who held every string. My heels clicked sharply against the polished floor, echoing loudly. Right beside me, walking with equal confidence, was Jasmine. She held a massive stack of thick, red legal folders pressed firmly against her chest. A massive wave of gasps rolled through the audience as we stepped into the bright stage lights. The reporters recognized me instantly from the initial startup promotional materials Weston had distributed years ago. But the woman standing before them now was entirely different from the quiet, supportive background character he painted me to be. Weston's eyes widened in sheer horror. All color drained from his bruised face, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost. He took a staggering step backward, completely forgetting about the cameras. Natalie, he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the edge of the stage. What are you doing here? Bianca looked from Weston to me, pure confusion mixing with intense panic. Who is this? Bianca demanded sharply, glaring at me. Why is your estranged wife crashing my press conference? I completely ignored both of them. I walked straight past Weston and stepped directly up to the center acrylic podium. I adjusted the microphone, leaning in so my voice would project perfectly across the massive auditorium. I am here to correct a legal discrepancy in today's corporate presentation, I announced, steady and clear. Jasmine stepped beside the podium and began handing the thick legal folders down to the technology journalists sitting in the front row. The reporters eagerly grabbed the heavy documents, immediately opening them to analyze the certified contents. For the past hour, you listened to this man claim he is a visionary chief executive. I continued staring into the flashing camera lenses. You listened to this woman claim she secured exclusive intellectual property rights. But the certified state documents currently being distributed reveal a completely different reality. 5 years ago, I meticulously drafted the foundational legal paperwork for this entire venture. I established the primary holding company, Zenith Financial Solutions, to protect our personal assets from his incredibly risky business decisions. Weston let out a choked gasp. He finally understood. The absolute crushing realization hit him with the massive physical force of a speeding freight train. He reached out as if he could physically pull the spoken words back into my mouth, but he was completely paralyzed by absolute sheer fear. He remembered the desperate hours he spent last night trying to guess the master password on a stolen decoy laptop. Due to extreme administrative laziness, I explained to the captivated audience, my arrogant husband simply copied and pasted my original legal templates when he formally formed this current startup. He completely failed to carefully read his own corporate equity assignment clauses. Therefore, every single line of code, every complex algorithm, and every predictive model created under this roof does not belong to his tech company. I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with Weston. His fragile, arrogant mask was completely gone, replaced by total, absolute ruin. He was a broken man, staring at the incredibly powerful woman he had underestimated for 10 years. I looked back out at the glowing red recording lights of the television cameras and offered a bright, devastating smile that would be broadcast to millions. He absolutely does not own the software I stated clearly I do. The heavy silence following my declaration lasted only a few seconds before Weston desperately tried to seize control of the narrative. He let out a loud, forced laugh that echoed awkwardly through the massive auditorium. He gripped the edges of his acrylic podium, his knuckles turning white as he leaned into the microphone. "Please forgive this completely unauthorized interruption," he announced to the room full of staring journalists, flashing a highly artificial smile. "This is incredibly embarrassing, but you are all witnessing a deeply personal family matter spilling onto the stage. The woman standing before you is my hysterical soon-to-be ex-wife, Natalie." He gestured dismissively toward me, shaking his head with manufactured pity. "We are currently going through a very bitter and highly contested divorce," he lied smoothly, attempting to manipulate the room. "She has been experiencing a severe mental breakdown over the separation. She is clearly extremely confused about the foundational legal architecture of my company and is attempting to completely sabotage my professional success out of pure spite and jealousy. I assure you her claims are absolutely baseless and completely fabricated." I stood perfectly still, letting him dig his own grave deeper and deeper, with every single arrogant word. I did not scream. I did not cry or act defensive. I simply turned my head and gave a sharp, deliberate nod to Jasmine, who was standing right next to the primary audio-visual control booth at the edge of the stage. Jasmine handed a small encrypted flash drive directly to the lead technician. With Naomi standing right there, giving the ultimate executive authorization, the technician immediately plugged the drive into the main broadcasting console. Weston continued to speak, trying to distract the reporters. "We have top-tier legal teams who have thoroughly vetted every single line of our proprietary code," he insisted, his voice growing louder and more frantic. "The intellectual property belongs entirely to me and this venture capital firm. Now, if security could please escort this deeply troubled woman off the premises, we can proceed with signing this historic term sheet." Before the confused venue security guards could even take a single step toward me, the massive high-definition LED screens behind Weston suddenly flared back to life. The pitch-black background was instantly replaced by a brilliant, glowing white light. Weston flinched, turning around to see what was happening. Displayed in massive crystal-clear resolution across the entire width of the stage was the original 50-page intellectual property assignment contract. It was the exact foundational document I had meticulously drafted 5 years ago. I stepped back up to my microphone. "You claim your legal teams vetted your code," I said, my voice projecting powerfully over his panicked stuttering. "But you clearly never bothered to actually read the contract you signed when you incorporated this specific software division. Let us look at the binding assignment clause on page 42. On the massive screen behind him, the digital document smoothly scrolled down and aggressively zoomed in on the critical legal paragraph. Jasmine highlighted the exact text in bright, glaring yellow so every single person in the auditorium could read it perfectly. "5 years ago, I created an umbrella holding company for your initial ventures," I explained to the captivated audience. "But when you stubbornly demanded a separate entity for your software development, you forced me to draft the paperwork. You were entirely too lazy to read the final documents before signing them. You simply assumed the intellectual property automatically defaulted to your personal name. But that is not how corporate law works, Weston." The journalists in the front row were already reading the massive highlighted text on the screen. A collective wave of shocked gasps swept through the room as the undeniable truth finally clicked into place. The binding legal text on the glowing screen did not list Weston as the owner. It did not list his fake tech startup. The document explicitly stated that the exclusive, perpetual, and irrevocable rights to the entire software algorithm were assigned directly and solely to Natalie Holdco LLC, a fully independent corporate entity that was 100% legally owned and operated by me. Weston stared up at the massive screen, his entire body trembling violently. The artificial tan on his face seemed to instantly vanish, leaving his skin a sickly pale gray. The absolute horrifying reality of his situation crashed down on him. He had spent the last 5 years working himself to the bone, raising millions of dollars, hiring staffs, and building a massive global brand entirely around a software algorithm he never actually owned. He had built his entire towering tech empire on a strict digital lease that he had never bothered to read. And I was the sole legal landlord. His face drained of all remaining blood as he realized he was totally ruined. The auditorium instantly erupted into a deafening roar of absolute chaos. The flashing lights of the press cameras went into a blinding frenzy, capturing every single second of the spectacular corporate collapse. Prominent technology journalists were shouting questions over each other, trying to get a direct quote. But the most immediate and devastating reaction came from the VIP seating area, right in the front row. The wealthy angel investors, who had previously backed Weston's early seed rounds, began standing up from their expensive chairs. They looked at the massive glowing screen displaying my holding company documents, and then looked at Weston with absolute disgust. A prominent billionaire investor who had heavily promoted the startup took out his phone and pointed directly at Weston. "I am pulling every single dollar of my remaining equity," he shouted over the overwhelming noise of the room. "My legal team is filing an emergency injunction against you for severe corporate misrepresentation. You lied to the entire board about the fundamental ownership of the intellectual property." Other prominent investors immediately joined the loud chorus of extremely angry wealthy men and women across the auditorium. They were rapidly dialing their private financial managers, frantically ordering immediate permanent freezes on any liquid capital associated with the entirely fraudulent tech startup. The massive $15 million valuation evaporated into thin air in less than 60 seconds. Weston stood completely paralyzed at the acrylic podium, silently watching his entire carefully constructed fake world burn to ash right in front of his terrified eyes. Bianca tried to salvage her own reputation. She turned away from Weston, distancing herself from him as quickly as possible. "This is not my fault," she yelled, trying to be heard over the panicked crowd. I was completely misled by the chief executive. I had absolutely no idea the legal documents were compromised. But her desperate lies were abruptly cut short by a sudden heavy commotion at the main entrance of the auditorium. The heavy wooden double doors at the back of the room swung open with incredible force. 4 individuals wearing dark windbreakers with bold yellow lettering across the back marched purposefully down the center aisle. Federal agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission, accompanied by armed federal marshals, had officially arrived. Naomi stood near the stage, offering a sharp, highly satisfied nod as the agents approached the front row. The journalists instantly parted like the Red Sea, allowing the federal agents a clear path straight to the stage. Bianca froze, completely terrified, as the lead agent stepped up the side stairs. "Bianca," he announced, his voice cutting through the remaining noise in the room with absolute legal authority. "We are executing a federal warrant regarding severe violations of the Securities Exchange Act wire fraud and the direct embezzlement of venture capital funds. You need to come with us right now." Bianca opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. 2 agents stepped forward firmly, taking her by the arms and guiding her away from the glass table. The cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing her massive public humiliation. She was not a powerful portfolio director anymore. She was a captured criminal being escorted out of her own press conference in front of the entire financial world. Her glittering $15,000 Cartier watch caught the stage lights one last time as she was marched out the back doors. Weston watched his mistress disappear. He looked down at the empty glass table where the massive $15 million term sheet sat completely unsigned and utterly worthless. He looked out at the angry investors who were actively calling their lawyers to sue him for everything he possessed. He looked at his mother Brenda, who was sitting frozen in the second row, her face buried in her hands, weeping in absolute shame. Finally, he turned slowly to look at me. The arrogant tech visionary was completely gone. The man who had mocked my career, frozen my bank accounts, and tried to evict me from my own home was entirely broken. His incredibly expensive custom Italian suit suddenly looked like a very pathetic cheap costume. He took a slow, trembling step away from the acrylic podium. His legs gave out completely. Right there in the bright center of the stage, surrounded by flashing cameras and rolling television crews, Weston dropped heavily to his knees. He looked up at me with tears streaming down his bruised face. His massive ego had completely shattered, leaving nothing but pure, pathetic desperation. "Natalie, please," he begged, his voice cracking into a high-pitched sob. "I am so sorry. I was completely wrong about everything. Please do not do this to me. I will do whatever you want. Just give me the company back. Give me the algorithm. Please, Natalie. I am begging you." I looked down at the man kneeling on the polished stage floor. The brilliant tech visionary, the arrogant husband, the master manipulator, was completely gone. In his place was just a terrified, desperate man weeping in a ruined designer suit. He reached out to grab the hem of my emerald green skirt, but I took a deliberate step backward, refusing to let him touch me. His tears meant absolutely nothing. They were not tears of genuine remorse or regret for betraying our 10-year marriage. They were the selfish, panicked tears of a man who had finally been caught and cornered by his own massive web of lies. I did not feel a single ounce of pity for him. I slowly reached into the heavy red legal folder Jasmine was holding and pulled out a thick, crisp white envelope. It was the exact same envelope Bianca had aggressively pushed across the coffee shop table when she tried to buy my silence for $500,000. I opened the flap and pulled out the thick stack of uncontested divorce papers his high-priced legal team had drafted. The very same documents he had planned to force me to sign while I was homeless and destitute. I held the dense legal paperwork out, dropping it casually onto the stage floor right in front of his knees. "I am not giving you the holding company, Weston," I stated, my voice perfectly cold and absolutely steady. "I am not giving you the software algorithm, and I am certainly not giving you a single dollar from my personal bank accounts. But I am going to offer you one final, extremely generous negotiation." Weston looked down at the divorce papers, his chest heaving with loud, jagged sobs. He looked back up at me, his eyes wide with desperate, terrified hope. "What do you mean?" he choked out, wiping a stream of sweat and tears from his pale face. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my personal cell phone. I tapped the screen, opening the secure digital file containing the military-grade keystroke logs we had captured from the decoy laptop early this morning. I turned the glowing screen toward him. "I have the exact, highly detailed transcripts of every single panicked email you sent to Bianca last night," I explained, watching the last tiny spark of hope violently die in his eyes. "I have your explicit written confession, ordering her to illegally hide the stolen severance kickbacks in the Cayman Islands Shell Company. The Securities and Exchange Commission already has Bianca's financial ledgers, but I am the only person who currently possesses your direct digital confession." I took a deep breath, letting the absolute gravity of the ultimatum settle over the silent auditorium. The remaining journalists in the room leaned forward, hanging on to my every word. "Sign these uncontested divorce papers right now," I commanded, pointing at the documents on the floor. "Sign away any and all fraudulent claims to my house, my savings, and my corporate holding company. You will leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it 10 years ago, which is absolutely nothing. If you sign them right now, I will walk out of this building and I will not hand over your wire fraud confession emails to the federal investigators." Weston stared at the papers. He was completely paralyzed. But we built this life together, he whispered weakly, a final pathetic attempt to manipulate my emotions. You cannot just leave me with nothing. I did not flinch. Jasmine stepped forward, her presence a massive wall of absolute unwavering support. You built a fake empire on her back, Weston, Jasmine said, her voice echoing fiercely. You stole her money, you stole her intellectual property, and you tried to throw her out onto the street. You have exactly 10 seconds to sign those papers before I personally call the federal marshals waiting outside and hand them the encrypted flash drive myself. Weston looked out at the audience. He saw the angry investors glaring at him. He saw the flashing cameras capturing his total humiliation. He looked at the second row where his mother Brenda was sitting completely silent, unable to protect her golden child from the devastating consequences of his own horrific actions. He had no leverage. He had no allies. He was entirely alone. His shoulders slumped in absolute agonizing defeat. The massive, blinding ego that had fueled his entire life completely shattered into dust. He reached out with a violently trembling hand and picked up the heavy gold fountain pen Bianca had left on the glass table. Still kneeling on the hard stage floor, tears streaming down his bruised face, he placed the divorce papers against the podium base. He choked back a heavy sob and signed. 6 months passed since the day the glass castle completely shattered on that Silicon Valley stage. The changing seasons brought a swift and absolute execution of justice. I drove past a massive retail strip mall on the edge of the city yesterday afternoon just to see it for myself. Through the large glass windows of a discount electronics store, I saw my former husband. Weston was no longer wearing custom-tailored Italian suits or driving a $100,000 sports car. He was wearing a stiff bright blue polyester polo shirt with a cheap plastic name tag pinned to his chest. He was working as a mid-level shift manager. I watched from the comfort of my car as a frustrated customer yelled at him over a broken television return. Weston simply stood there looking incredibly tired and deeply aged, aggressively apologizing while ringing up the transaction. He had lost absolutely everything. When the massive public scandal broke, his mother Brenda was so utterly humiliated by the intense media coverage that she legally disinherited him. She changed her phone numbers, sold her massive house, and moved completely out of state, refusing to associate with the son who had destroyed the family reputation. He was entirely cut off, forced to work retail just to pay the rent on his tiny studio apartment. Bianca faced an even darker reality. She did not get to quietly resign and fade into the background. The federal agents who escorted her out of the press conference built a massive, impenetrable case against her. The keystroke logs from the stolen decoy laptop, combined with the handwritten offshore bank ledgers, proved premeditated wire fraud and severe embezzlement. Her highly publicized criminal trial was set to begin next month, but her high-priced legal team had already abandoned her when the government officially seized every single one of her financial assets. She was currently under strict house arrest, wearing a heavy federal ankle monitor inside a tiny rented duplex. The $15,000 Cartier watch was gone, seized as evidence of her crimes. She was facing up to 20 years in federal prison. Her powerful industry connections had completely blacklisted her the moment the story hit the financial news networks. She was a total outcast, entirely ruined by her own blinding greed and extreme arrogance. My own life, however, took an entirely different trajectory. The morning after the explosive press conference, the managing partner of my forensic accounting firm called me directly. He offered an incredibly profuse apology for my temporary suspension. The anonymous complaint filed by Bianca was entirely expunged from my professional record. But I did not just return to my old desk. Leveraging the massive national exposure I received for uncovering a multi-million-dollar corporate fraud ring, I demanded, and received a massive promotion. I was now a senior partner, heading my own elite division dedicated exclusively to investigating complex venture capital fraud. I was making 3 times my original salary, and I finally had the absolute respect I rightfully deserved. But my absolute sweetest victory happened later that evening. I walked into the very same upscale Manhattan restaurant where this entire nightmare began 6 months ago. But this time, I was not sitting alone waiting for a cheating husband to lie to me. I was led to the best private table in the main dining room. Jasmine and Naomi were already sitting there looking absolutely radiant. Jasmine wore a stunning dark red dress, and Naomi wore a sharp black designer blazer. As I took my seat, the waiter immediately brought over a chilled bottle of the most expensive vintage champagne on the menu. We did not just gather to celebrate the downfall of our enemies. We gathered to celebrate a massive, highly lucrative business transaction. Earlier that morning, I had officially signed the legal paperwork transferring the exclusive intellectual property rights of my software algorithm directly to Naomi's venture capital firm. Naomi recognized the true mathematical genius of the predictive model and negotiated a completely legitimate buyout. Natalie Holdco legally sold the software for exactly $10 million. Naomi raised her crystal glass of champagne, the sparkling liquid catching the warm restaurant light. To women who refused to be underestimated, she toasted, her sharp eyes gleaming with pure triumph. Jasmine raised her glass, clinking it gently against Naomi's. And to taking out the trash, Jasmine added with a brilliant, fierce smile. I raised my glass, feeling the weight of my new empire and the absolute freedom of my new life. I looked at the two incredible women who had helped me burn a toxic world to the ground so I could build my own beautiful reality. To sweet revenge, I said softly. We drank the champagne. I finally knew what true power felt like. In the story of Natalie Weston and Bianca, the most profound lesson is the immense power of emotional restraint and strategic preparation. When faced with the ultimate betrayal of a cheating spouse and financial theft, the natural human instinct is to scream fiercely, confront the betrayer, and demand immediate justice. However, Natalie completely defied this predictable instinct. By staying perfectly calm when she first discovered her husband's infidelity, she maintained the ultimate upper hand. Her silence was never a sign of weakness. It was a highly calculated weapon. Weston's blinding arrogance caused him to severely underestimate her intelligence, allowing her to systematically dismantle his fraudulent tech empire from the inside out. She meticulously gathered legal evidence, built powerful alliances with women like Jasmine and Naomi, and secured her personal assets without ever once tipping her hand. This narrative teaches us a vital, real-life lesson: emotional outbursts often surrender our power to the very people who have wronged us. Manipulators, narcissists, and toxic individuals absolutely thrive on creating chaos and provoking frantic emotional reactions from their victims. When we choose to detach emotionally and rely entirely on facts, logic, and quiet preparation, we become fundamentally untouchable. Natalie's spectacular victory was not merely about financial revenge against her corrupt husband. It was about reclaiming her self-worth, enforcing unbreakable boundaries, and refusing to play the helpless victim in someone else's toxic narrative. Her meticulous attention to detail, remembering the legal foundation she built half a decade prior, ultimately set her free. True justice rarely comes from an immediate, explosive confrontation. It comes from playing the long game with absolute precision and unshakable confidence. If this story inspired you to reclaim your power from toxic people, please share this message with someone who needs to be reminded of their own incredible strength today.